Virgil Kane is a name, and I worked on the Danville train till Stoneman's cavalry came and they broke up the tracks again. In the winter of 65, we were hungry, just barely alive. By May 10th, Richmond had fell. It was a time I remember oh so well. The night they drove old Dixie down, and the bells were ringing. The night they drove old Dixie down, and the people were singing. They said, na 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 na. Good evening, everyone. How you doing tonight? Welcome to the House of Auger radio show. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very good.
Just had to check to make sure that I didn't get cut out during that song. That would have sucked, and there was a slight bit of worry that I had. All right, I am your host, man of the house, JT Auger, and with me tonight are my co-hosts Adam, Joel, and Nicole. I think are with us. Sativa and John McIntyre. Mac, everybody say hello.
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 Hello, back.
With us
guys.
tonight. Hey, there he is.
Hey.
All right, with us tonight is a very was that Nicole?
Yep, I'm in here as Nicole G, by the way. Hey, everyone.
Nice. Normally, Joel and Nicole share an account because they are one person and they with one brain,
Married life.
and one mind, and resistance is futile. But tonight they're two people, so thank you for that, guys. With us tonight is a very special guest, Mr. Robert Edward Foy, who I will be referring to as Foy from here on out. Foy, you with us?
Yes, sir. And thank you very much for that introduction and having me on, Mr. Auger.
Thank you. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Now, before we begin with tonight's interview and all, I should let everybody know, for you listeners, new and old, there's a bit of a disclaimer. This is not a family-friendly show. There will be cursing. There will be mature subject matter being discussed. There will be jokes of an adult nature. This is not a friendly child zone. So if you're a child and you're listening to this, don't let your parents know. All right. Other than that, normally we would just go into the interview, but we're going to do things a little differently now. Am I still there?
Yes, sir.
Great. I should also let everybody know, I get cut out every once in a while. It's a weird glitch thing. I'm trying to figure it out. Haven't quite figured out the fix yet. I'm working on it. But I cut out every once in a while. When I do, Adam's going to take over. We're going to keep the show going. I come back about a minute or so every time. But if I come back and you're wondering why it sounds like I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, that's probably why. Other than that, I want to do a new thing called a Week in Review, where we're going to talk about current events. I would like to invite Mr. Foy to join us for that, if you will.
Yeah.
Great. This is normally, I like to keep current events. We're going to talk about that for the first half hour or so. It's kind of inappropriately named because sometimes I'll probably be talking about stuff that's more than a week old. But tonight I'm definitely not. I kind of want to go over two major issues that are all brand new. For those of you that don't know, there was recently in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, there was a statue that was pulled down last night called Silent Sam. Kind of a big issue. So this was, there was a protest last night against white supremacy. I guess things have been a bit of a hotbed over in North Carolina since Charlottesville. Everybody remember Charlottesville from last year?
Oh, yeah, of
Yes,
course.
of course.
Yeah. So I guess since the 60s, there's been sort of an issue with this particular statue. At different times, this has come up in protest or movements and things. I was reading about this a bit today, and I guess this really culminated within the last year because of Charlottesville. Let's see. This all happened last night during a protest against white supremacy. There were counter protesters. It got a little heated, from what I understand. Actually, this was in regards to back in April. Somebody threw blood and ink at the statue, perhaps damaging it. And there were supposed to be sanctions against this particular student who did that. And this was in protest against that, saying that, you shouldn't, whatever sanctions they were planning, they didn't want him to do that. Am I still there?
Yes, sir.
Great. And I guess it got heated enough that they decided we need to tear this puppy down. So they started chanting that. They started putting up shields. And they did just that. They tore down the statue. From what I understand, this has provoked a lot of outrage, mostly among the university leaders and Republican lawmakers who control the state legislature. They've all sharply criticized the toppling, but the mood on the campus seems celebratory, from what I'm reading. Carol Folt, who is the university chancellor, acknowledged in an open letter today that the statue's presence has been divisive for years, but still called Monday night's events unlawful and dangerous. The president of the statewide University of North Carolina system, as well as the chairman of its board of governors, took a similarly hard line on their own statement, calling the vandalism unacceptable, dangerous. I guess it could be, like, if it fell on somebody, and I guess if you were taking it down improperly, and incomprehensible. I kind of feel like they should have said more. This was wrong. I don't know. Incomprehensible seems kind of like a dodgy word to me. It doesn't flat out say this was illegal. You shouldn't have done this. They added that mob rule and the intentional destruction of public property will not be tolerated. Well, at least they got that part right. They said campus police were gathering evidence to inform a full criminal investigation. Some curious things about the statue itself. It was proposed in 1908 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They had gathered in charity donations somewhere around $7.5 grand, which at the time it equates now to somewhere around a couple $100,000. And they got some guy, I forget his name. They got somebody some Canadian to make the statue who had made quite a few others, and used the same guy, interestingly, that he used for some of these other statues down there, which are all kind of the silent or these, I don't know, whatever you call them, the guys with the Confederate soldiers.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Auger, I could jump in a little bit, or
I would love for you to.
Okay, well, hi everyone. So yeah, this was a monument, and you said it was proposed in 1908, and I believe it was made in 1913. Yeah, and so this is a monument to the war dead. Okay, so the University of North Carolina, the Confederate States had the first military draft in American history, by the way, and students were not exceptional to this draft. Yeah, they were not exceptional to this draft. So this is a monument to war dead, to students who were drafted and were killed in the war, and they call it Silent Sam because we don't know the names of a lot of these students who were drafted and killed. And so, yes, they're tearing down a monument to the war dead that was put up by the children of people who died in the war. And
right.
I have a little bit of information about the group that does this. So this group that pulled down this monument just the other day. They pulled down another monument in North Carolina last year in Durham. I think that's a city or a county in North Carolina. And I'm going to post the link right now. The leader of this group that is organizing these events, her last name is Thompson, and she is a member of the Workers' World Party, WWP, a revolutionary Marxist-Leninist group originally formed in 1959 as a hardline offshoot to the more moderate Socialist Workers' Party.
Get out of town.
So this is like literal communist groups organizing these, these protests to tear down these monuments to the war dead that were put up by the children of those who died. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Polls do show that most Americans do not support tearing down these monuments. And, I'm sure we're going to talk about this topic in more detail, the American Civil War as we go along in this. But yeah, I just wanted to jump in that like these are literal communists pulling down monuments to the war dead, and
that's
I think this works
to me.
Yeah, I think this works against them. I think I'm expecting.
I hope so.
Yeah. And
I really hope so, because they did arrest a couple of people there. And that's interesting. I didn't know anything about the group that was involved that pulled this down. That's news to me, and I thank you for that, because I did have a question while I was reading all this. I was like, my frustration is this: a lot of universities take in students from elsewhere. A lot of the students end up not being from that state.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was curious to know, my first question reading that was, how many of the people involved in bringing that down are from North Carolina? Like, how many of them were born and raised there? How many of them live there? Because that would really chap my hide. You know what I mean? Like, if a bunch of students from fucking,
I think Mr. Auger got disconnected there. Yeah. But yeah, he's absolutely right. Most people go out of state or move for college, and I guarantee most of these people aren't born in the South. And, regarding this monument thing, whatever your opinions are on the Confederates and the American Civil War, I've been very adamant in saying that this is not ever going to stop with Confederates. They removed something from George Washington's church that he went to, and that is because George Washington was a slave owner. There are articles and, kind of petitions to remove the Thomas Jefferson statue at UVA, which is the university that he founded. And so it's whatever your opinion is, you don't have to agree with the Confederates or like them, but I'm just giving you guys the heads up, and I'm going to keep always reminding people that it's never going to stop with them. It's just about removing early American history. We are the worst people ever because, we our founders that gave us the government were slave owners. And so it just all has to be burned down, and you can't have any admiration for that.
My curiosity to that, too, is what country's history is founded on sainthood? You know what I mean? Like, what other country in the world doesn't have some blood and dirt in their foundation? Nobody's. All of these civilizations are built on the backs of other dead civilizations or conquered ones. You can't. And yet we're being singled out. It's very frustrating, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah, just about everybody, their genes, your ancestors, you either have genes of somebody who was oppressing others, or you have genes of, someone who was oppressed. And, my genes come from Ireland, and, everything that the Black Americans say about, the plantation owners and early Americans, I could say about the Anglos and what they did to the Irish for over 700 years. And, you don't see me fucking crying about it all the time.
Well, we're Irish. It's not in our nature.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, depending on how much whiskey I have, then I'll start talking about the British. But
yeah, but we don't do it with like we're crying. We get angry and we start punching people. Um,
but
I'm curious.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, I was prepared to talk about this topic a little bit more in depth. Obviously, people who know me, my name is after Robert E. Lee. That's my profile picture and how I go around this. So,
do you mind just real quick? Can we come back to this? We've got about maybe another 15 minutes. I just want to go over the Tibbetts situation, and then let's come back to this. Is that all right?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. I appreciate that. So the other topic that I wanted to talk about, which is brand spanking new and is very tragic and very frustrating, is the the story of Molly Tibbetts, who went missing. She lived in Ohio, and she went missing about a month ago. Back July 18th was her last sighting when she was seen by her brother. The last time she was seen by her boyfriend was July 16th. She was last seen by her brother July 18th. That was the official last sighting. She went jogging that day around 7:30 p.m., and that's the last anybody heard. Took a couple of days before they started to really believe that she was missing. And that's when the search began, was about July 20th. Funny little side note, some notable Ohioans started getting involved, tweeting about it, trying to get the public to notice this particular case of a missing girl. Tom Arnold, NBA player Harrison Barnes, and NFL rookie Josie Jewell all tweeted about this and tried to get people to either donate or get involved somehow. The search was really difficult, apparently, surrounded by farm ground, corn and soybeans, and the corn right now is about 8 to 9 feet tall, and the only way to search is basically walk down each row, which made things very slow and difficult. They ended up finding her body today in a farm field covered by corn stalks. An illegal immigrant by the name of Christian Bahena Rivera, aged 24, is charged with her murder. He looks to be facing murder in the first. Apparently, some surveillance video that was turned over to the police by a neighbor shows, I guess this was recent that it was turned over. It shows Molly running, and then it shows Rivera's car. It also shows Rivera following Tibbetts. After this video, they decided to go ahead and put out a warrant for his arrest. They arrested him, and Rivera told investigators that he approached Molly running behind her that night, at which point she threatened to call the police, pulling out her phone. And at this point, Rivera, it's funny, but it's also very fucking infuriating. Rivera claims that he blacked out at this point. Yeah. And then he woke up and Tibbetts just happened to be dead. They wound up in a cornfield, and he didn't know how, he didn't know what happened, and she just was dead. And I guess he covered her with corn stalks and kind of moseyed on away, fearful for his safety, considering he thought he would probably be connected to her murder. Who'd have thought? So Rivera's been living here illegally. This is the real frustrating issue. For anywhere from 4 to 7 years. I'm curious to know why they don't know, but I guess that makes sense. I mean, if you're here illegally, it's not like they have any official records of like exactly when you got here. So they kind of have to go off of what they think they know, I'm assuming, but they think he's been here for 4 to 7 years. If this man had been dealt with, if he had been deported and kept out of the country, this girl would still be alive today. Now, Foy, I know that you posted something in your Facebook group, BCL Confederation, about this. I think it was a tweet from her. Is that not correct?
Yeah, so in typical fashion, never wasting a crisis, some people kind of dug up her history, and I believe it was 4chan. So 4chan found a tweet of hers from about over a year ago, where she's commenting on the election result, where it shows the demographics, and it shows that the majority of white people were voting Republican, and her quote was, I hate white people. That was the tweet. Now, this is 4chan and other people just kind of being edgy. And, I'm pretty desensitized. I can make a joke about stuff you're not supposed to. With this story, though, I normally don't pay attention to stuff like this that often. But this is one that actually did catch my eye. And before obviously we learned about what happened today, but I was like, oh man, this really does suck. This is so sad. I hope they find this girl. And, I was thinking, well, this is maybe just some, dumb slut who got drunk and wandered off somewhere. But no, this was a girl in a very rural town who's going for a jog. And, I think something like this. So, this happens. Who is that Kate girl in San Francisco?
Yes, I was going to say this reminds me distinctly of that case. Now, the only thing that I can hope for is that because this is Ohio and not fucking communist fucking California, I hate my fucking state. I fucking hate this state.
I just want to say, when I learned that you were from California, Auger, out of everything, that's the thing that really disappointed me the most. So I was like, fuck.
You're disappointed? How do you think I feel? I'm a pariah in my own fucking state, dude. I can't talk to nobody.
It's a choice to live there. It's a choice to live there. But go on.
It is. You're right, and it's one that I've been bitching about it and talking about moving for quite a while. But yeah, I'm hoping that the way things went with the Heinley girl, that guy got out scot-free. Talking about, I just found the gun and I accidentally shot her. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like, this is ridiculous. Fuck you, California. But this should be clear and cut. This is an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned. This guy needs to get the fucking...
Perfect timing as usual.
It looks like Auger cut out. But this story will eventually be buried. It's gonna rile up the more anti-immigrant, more right-wing conservative element in American politics, and she'll be, she's gonna be an anti-immigration martyr for sure. Yeah. But it's gonna be, buried pretty shortly. Within a month, I'm actually going to say within a week, maybe within a couple weeks, no one's ever going to talk about her again. At least on CNN.
I agree. It's really sad, but
you think so? You think nobody's going to talk to her about in a month?
Well, no, I think, I don't know. It depends. With
as far as mainstream goes.
Yeah. With the midterms right around the door.
I don't know. Here's why I think that there's a possibility that might not be the way it goes. And it's because the liberals in this country, I half expect to rally around this kid and say you can't punish him. He's an innocent victim. He was trying to live his life, the same way they did with the Heinley girl and her perpetrator, her fucking murderer.
You had a few rogue cases of people doing that, but I think most mainstream leftists were just like, oh crap, this is actually something that contradicts our narrative, so let's brush it under the rug as if it didn't happen. I think that's what's going to happen.
All right, that's a good point.
You're going to have some people that are so entrenched in their partisan ways that they're going to defend this guy, but I think the most people on the left side of the aisle will just kind of brush it under the rug.
Right. Instead of giving it any light, they're going to want to lock that away.
And I think this will radicalize, kind of the right people, the people who are fed up and aware about this, that, Democrats want to bring an unlimited amount of these people into our country and, want us to put up with it and not talk about it. And, so I think her death, while it's really unfortunate, it's going to go to a greater cause of kind of riling people up. I'm sure if anyone in her family or cared about this girl was all for immigrants, maybe now they're going to have some reservations about it. And we could talk about immigration and open borders later, but
Oh, and we definitely will. We definitely will. But I'm really sad to see this girl. I think you mentioned in your post that this girl would be used as kind of a talking point for those who want immigration to be more strictly enforced.
Yeah, and, and based off her tweets that were dug up, it appears. I mean, granted, when I was her age, I was a frickin' socialist, okay? And yeah, I don't hold it against her for saying stupid shit on Twitter. I'm sure she was your typical progressive college thought. But, regardless of her beliefs, she's going to be used to fuel this anti-immigrant sentiment that basically is coming around with Trump. And, I think Trump and the Republicans are going to use it.
Do you really feel that it's anti-immigrant or is it anti-illegal immigrant? Because I really feel like it's being like the left is blurring the lines with that to make it seem like we're fearful of anybody other than, right? Like, and it's not the case. I really don't feel like anybody center or right of center is upset about immigration. They just want illegal immigration to be more strictly enforced.
Yeah, well, the right-wing conservatives are always more like law and order type. And, and me personally, I don't necessarily have a problem if someone goes through all the proper channels to legally migrate here. In fact, I almost think it's a little too difficult in some instances. But
I do agree. I think it's something like 12 years is average, anywhere from 12 to 20, I think. Which is crazy. That's just absolutely crazy to take that long.
Yeah, no, I grew up, in my state, there's a large Hispanic population. And I grew up with a kid who is Hispanic and his father is from Mexico. And it took him almost 10 years to become a citizen. And, he's very proud to be an American. And I will say him and his family are very ardent Trump supporters. They're not, just wanting all of these people to walk through. But, this is just we could talk about this in depth later about the whole open borders thing, but it's very disingenuous to just be so welcoming of outsiders. Do you guys lock your doors at night? I mean, look at what happened when the Europeans arrived to the Americas. Let's put aside the fact that, some of the Europeans were cunts and, oppressed and enslaved the native populations. Even if the Europeans were the nicest people in the world to the natives when they came here, most of the natives would have died just from disease, from contact with diseases alone. So don't sit there and tell me that, it's completely normal to be completely welcoming of outsiders that you've never it's such horse shit, and it makes me mad. And, I think the people that hold these beliefs, historically they wouldn't be in the gene pool that long, just being so welcoming of outsiders, come in my house and fuck my wife, I fucking hate it.
Well, it seems like there's a few. Apparently that's a trend. Well, I want to thank you for kind of going over those things. I know we didn't finish really. I know I didn't dig in as deep as I wanted to in either of those. So we'll come back to those. But I really want to move towards the interview now, if we can.
Yeah,
so, sure. Foy, there are perhaps a couple of listeners who don't know who you are. So I would like you, if you could, take a moment to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, let me just be clear how I kind of, know about this whole Discord show you got going on, Auger. I work. I was like, why the fuck are we all here right now, right? But I work the graveyard shift, and I get the opportunity to listen to a bunch of podcasts and audiobooks. And one night I stumbled across yours, and I binged, quite a few of them. And I just thought having. Yeah, I think I listened through 4 or 5 of them. So at work for like 10 hours, I listened. Your voice was in my ears, Auger, and I just thought having a right, and
that's everybody's nightmare.
I thought just having a conversation with you would be fun and maybe a little informative to people listening, and I just have to be upfront here. I'm a writer. I'm not really a fan of my verbal skills or the sound of my voice over audio. I think it sounds like really nasally and high pitched. It's part of the reason I've put off doing stuff like this for so long. Like when some of y'all first heard my voice and the BCL Discord server, you told me you were expecting a very deep patriarchal man voice like Robert E. Lee. And, I'm sorry to disappoint.
Yes, that was the only thing. It's so funny with the way that you write. See, it was a long time before I ever got to see what your face looked like or hear what your voice sounded like. I don't think I saw. I think I heard you before I saw you, and that was because of that podcast you did with some folks.
Yeah.
And you posted that and promoted that and advertised that in the BCLR. Which is the group for anybody listening who doesn't know. That's kind of where I know Foy from, and that's I think where the majority of us discovered Foy. He's kind of the grandfather of all the BCL groups, which stands for Being Classically Liberal. If I understand it correctly, you started with the page. Is that correct?
Yeah. I started I started blogging on that page in 2013. And it had about 2,000 likes at the time. And, basically I came to that page. My blogging career kind of basically started after getting in trouble talking politics on Facebook with my family, friends, and students. So I needed some kind of outlet. And so, I reached out to the page. They added me on. The admin, Corey, he's a very nice and tolerant man to put up with me over the years. And, yeah, this is where I posted my memes and writings for the last 5 years. And just in regards to my internet usage and history, I've been on the internet since I was 10 years old, and I've been on 4chan for almost a decade. So I am completely desensitized to just about everything, and it's pretty hard to offend me. And, I love making jokes about things you're not supposed to. And I'll just be upfront and say that for years, I was basically a drunk who loved trolling and agitating people on the internet. I just love riling people up. It's a very guilty pleasure of mine. So yes, the Being Classically Liberal page is kind of where I started and, got this outlet, this audience. And in 2018, I started my own Facebook page called Rebel History. And this is basically just an attempt to clean up my act. And, we can talk about the history page later and stuff. But, yeah, that's where I started at. And that's why you're all hearing the sound of my voice right now. So I think Auger got disconnected.
Yeah, I guess he did. Sorry, hold on. I am distracted by a puppy right here.
No, you're good. If anyone else has that awkward silence.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys want to, Auger is from California, and I hope that helps explain his behavior. But go ahead and make it.
So Foy, so it's about time for the interview section of our broadcast. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal life, or what you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, no, that's completely fine with me. And just as a heads up, I can ramble a lot. And, don't be shy to interrupt me or chime in or ask me a question. But yeah, I operate under a pseudonym, and I'm very edgy and confrontational in my writing and my social media activity. But when I'm talking to others, like using my voice in a conversation like this or in my personal life, I'm much more reasonable, as I'll get into. But I just like riling people up online. I think that's anonymity online and shit posting is was a hobby or passion of mine. And as I get older and more mature, I do want to try and communicate some of these crazy yet reasonable ideas in my head. But
sure.
Are you back, Auger? Yeah. So I was just going to kind of go into an introduction of a little bit of my personal life and such. So,
okay. Please do.
Yeah. And you guys could feel free to ask me questions. But, mostly I'm probably going to keep this related to my political development. But, just a little bit about me. I was born in the Midwest in a shithole state run by literal corrupt Democrats. And thankfully, when I was a small child, my parents fled and we settled down south. And so, and so I'm a carpetbagging Yankee. I don't like to tell a lot of people that. But
you don't have. You must have. I mean, when did you end up moving down south?
About 17 years ago. So I grew up here basically, and so
but
I really
you never developed the accent, really.
Not really. I have like this weird like Irish accent, Midwest accent, kind of where I'm from. It kind of sticks out to some people, but yeah. When I start drinking a little more, I think I can sound like John F. Kennedy. But yeah, let me get a little more.
God is my witness. That's funny.
But let me get a little more personal with y'all. When I was a kid, at a young age, I was one of those kids that they drugged to get through public school, basically with Ritalin and then Adderall. And
man,
yeah, and I took that stuff for at least a decade. And it wasn't until I was like an adult that I realized that they gave me and like millions of children, speed, basically forms of amphetamines.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of resentful to that, but at the same time, I don't want to dwell on it or say it like really like, I don't want to say that it wasn't somewhat effective. I think there are benefits and risks to everything like this. And, but yeah, I just like to point out that we live in a society that drugs millions of children. So, but go on.
No, I absolutely agree. Now, as I understand it, the kids that they were giving that stuff to were kind of like hyper kids, and the drugs were supposed to mellow them out. Is that how that worked for you?
Yeah, no, I was one of those kids. I couldn't sit, the public school situation is just a whole mess. And, I just think having kids sit still for 8 hours a day in a classroom is, it's not normal. And so like, I would be the kid, I would get up and go sharpen my pencil just to go do it. My pencil didn't even need to be sharpened, or I would just, I just couldn't sit still. And, I struggled with school. It didn't interest me and it was really boring to me. And, when I got placed on the medication, I did phenomenal on it. And, I don't want to say, I think the medications are overprescribed, but I do think sometimes they are.
I do.
Yeah. But I do think sometimes, it might benefit or be warranted. I have, kids I know in my family or just friends. I mean, I know kids who, were literal demon childs in school. I mean, I'm talking about wouldn't listen, would stand up on top of their desk and scream and take off their clothes. But, you give them a little dose of Ritalin, they sit still and they do what they're told. And yeah, so, I like with all this stuff, like I said, I just think there's risk versus benefits. And, I think there's some, it helped me out a little bit, but it also, I would say, negatively impacted me and others too in some ways.
Yeah, see, that's the part that concerns. See, I'm from what I'm gathering, I think I'm about maybe 10 years older than you are. So I watched what you're talking about happen with my nieces and nephews, and I kind of feel like I don't know how the cost benefit, risk benefit, cost benefit ratio. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just risk versus benefit. So with any
risk versus reward. Sorry, I got a little caught up there. I feel like the reward or benefit is so negligible compared to the risk. I mean, the first red flag for me is that we were doing this to millions of kids.
Yeah.
And potentially still are. Like, there's no way that can be correct. Really? Millions of our kids need this stuff? I don't know about that. This seems really bad. It seems like a really bad idea. And then, like you said, it's essentially government speed given to kids.
Yeah.
It strikes me as being equivalent to, well, Johnny's acting up, so let's give him whiskey till he's so fucking sauced that We don't have to worry about them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it just that does not seem like the appropriate way to handle that, regardless of the benefit.
And I just think it's a product of the public school system. The public school system in the United States is based off something called the Prussian public school system. And this was developed in the 1800s. So basically, the first public schools in the United States in the 1800s modeled themselves off the public schools in Prussia. And what did the public school? Yeah, and so what did the public schools in Prussia teach? They basically made students, obedient workers and soldiers, for the state. And so, this is kind of where this originated. And like I said, I think kids want to do stuff they're interested in. They don't want to sit in a classroom all day and go through, boring shit. Okay, I don't fucking care about geometry. I'll get into I was always more interested in history. Like, I don't fucking care, X versus Y equals Z. Tell me about the first president of the United States and stuff like that. So, I just think I attribute it all to the school system. And then at the same time, I believe, just the diagnosis criteria for ADHD or ADD is very broad. If you look it up, virtually every one of us experiences those type of symptoms. And
it seems to me like the symptoms equate to, you mean a kid. You mean a kid being a kid.
Yeah.
It's, it just, I'm no expert, but that's definitely the impression I've been left with. And I think it lends itself to the idea that there absolutely is a concern with big pharma. A lot of people shake their head or roll their eyes and they go, here we go. Here's a crackpot theorist. Here's a conspiracy theory. And it's like, yeah, but how can you ignore stuff like this and say that there's not anything? You don't believe there's any legitimacy to this concern when you've got millions of kids being drugged? You've got the state trying to force kids to view them as mom and dad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, from this experience, I just became, very skeptical about the world we're in. Okay. Basically it's shut up, take your pill and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And, so, I kind of rebelled against that. But yeah, kind of going back into when I was a kid in the 90s, the History Channel used to actually show history. And I always loved watching and learning about history, and more specifically military history. And, it's a huge passion of mine. And, unfortunately, history is an inherently political topic. So it was quite natural that I became interested in politics at a younger age. And, I just wanted to learn. I just thought the political process was really important. And, when I was a teenager, I was a socialist, and I was born in a conservative Republican family, basic bitch conservatives. And I kind of rebelled against that. And, that's what I was just going to ask. Did you do it out of rebellion? Because that seems like it's so far on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, I just I was an Obama supporter when I was, he got elected when I was in high school for his first term. And, but to my credit, I was at least like an honest leftist. And I became pretty dissatisfied with Obama's presidency, like with the Affordable Care Act. I was like, what the fuck is this, Obama? You're forcing people to buy insurance from private companies. Like, why didn't you give us a Medicare for all type system? And, I just thought, I just thought that people who didn't want to, delegate all of these problems to the government to solve, they were kind of misinformed or, had bad intentions. But, Obama taught me for his credit, he made me aware of how broken the political system was, because he did basically the opposite of everything that he was elected on. And
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. I'm just agreeing. I'm liking what I hear. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So with Obama eating a bag of dicks, I was pretty ripe. I was pretty ripe for something new to be part of and believe in. And I basically became politically awakened and active in 2011. during Ron Paul's third presidential campaign. And back then in today's climate, Ron Paul was like the epitome of an anti-establishment politician who got attacked all sorts by, both sides of the political spectrum. And, it remains around to this day. He's a controversial guy. And,
absolutely.
He wasn't ever going to win, but, he absolutely got cheated out of like delegates and such, just as bad as kind of Bernie Sanders did versus Clinton in 2016. So really quick, when I kind of got awakened to politics and I got really interested in it and I found something I liked, I saw how, corrupt and almost hopeless it was. And so, I kind of got set up for the dissident path. And, I understand Ron Paul's like 80 years old now and he's getting senile and he's far from being like a perfect person. But the one thing that Paul did for me and that I owe a tremendous debt to him is the fact that he cured my apathy. I actually care about what's happening to my country and the future of it, which is why you're hearing the sound of my voice, which is why I became a writer. Libertarianism, which we'll get into, it's a very intellectual rabbit hole to fall down. And, he turned this socialist-leaning, 20-year-old at the time who never, ever read books into, like, I became a bookworm, who now became arguably a right-wing extremist. So were you guys ever a fan of Ron Paul?
I liked him on some aspects. I thought he was a bit of a wild card and a bit of a crazy coot who could say some really smart and legitimate things, and then every once in a while would throw out something that was just like, what the fuck? Like, wait a minute, you're making sense. Oh shit!
No, you're still here. I think, but I was definitely a fan of Ron Paul.
Yeah, McIntyre, if you don't mind, you're in the military, right? So because I
am.
A lot of military members overwhelmingly, like this was recorded in stats, overwhelmingly supported Ron Paul. And
I mean, they've done polls in the hold on. They've done polls in the like Military Times, like newspaper, and like, who do you want for president? Just because it's fun, and then they're gonna be like, Ron Paul always came out on top. It wasn't a scientific poll, but they're only polling military members, and it was just kind of like, you see what we're doing there on boots on the ground, and you're like, okay, so yeah, I'm concerned about these 20 kilometers, and we did the best we could, but me as a foot soldier, I really don't have any influence outside of these 20 kilometers.
Yeah, and so what I was getting at is, the whole anti-intervention aspect of Ron Paul and the foreign policy, which is a very passionate topic of mine that, I'll talk about entirely separately because I don't know, it riles me up still. Like, I went from like being really edgy anti foreign intervention to like, I generally do care about the soldiers, and I don't want them to be killed in these stupid shithole countries like the majority of people can't find on a map. I'm sorry, but the majority of Americans cannot find Afghanistan on a map. They can't find, most of them can barely find the Korean Peninsula. So I don't want us. I care about the soldiers, and Ron Paul, like I said, I was always kind of a big fan of military history, and Ron Paul put this into a whole different perspective. And, when I saw all the support he got from, active duty military, I'm like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. But Auger, did you get disconnected or are you back?
Yeah. So we'll wait for him to come back. But my stance has always been like, same as Ron Paul, like, you don't trash a soldier who just spent 12 years in public schooling, being taught by the state, and then he goes off and he hears all these great financial incentives from the state. Of course he's going to join. It's either that or he stays. For some of them, they stay in that bad neighborhood. I've met soldiers like that, and they're so much better because of it, because they were able to escape. and they were able to
Yeah.
have some type of leadership over top of them.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I agree. Go ahead.
As do I. No, I was just going to say the same.
Yeah, and I think libertarians and like the anarchist faction about this, like once you become exposed to this stuff, you become like really anti-government, anti-authority, and you want to trash, the police, you want to trash the soldiers, like for a while, the longest time, I thought of like all police officers in the United States, and I thought of all soldiers in the United States as like literal like stormtroopers or like redcoats. That's what I called them, as stormtroopers and
Road
redcoats.
pirates.
Yes, road pirates is my favorate. They kind of are road pirates still. I've been
They
pulled
are,
over.
yeah, I still kind of use that.
Fucking dicks.
I was sort of disowned by my mother's side of the family because this is when the slew of there was like a slew of not murders, I don't want to say that, interactions that led to death with black guys and cops. There was the what's his name, Brown, was the big dude who fucking went after the cop's gun.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown. And then there was the guy. Right. I saw that and I was like, dude, there was a lot of misinformation and some of that I bought into at the time, and I was like, that cop's fucking, what a dick. Why'd he shoot him so many times? And then there was the issue of the guy who couldn't breathe. He was brought down on the street in New York. I can't remember his name either.
I think it was, I can't remember either, but that one was pretty fucked up. I do remember that.
Yeah,
one.
that's
Freddie Gray what chat is saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and then there were like another couple more, and these all happened kind of within a short period of time amongst each other, like the kind of as though there was this kind of epidemic happening. And then the media started pressing the point by showing the cops being involved in a lot of altercations that were questionable as to whether or not they used excessive
Eric
force.
Garner. Sorry.
Eric Garner. Yeah. And then there was the I was watching, what's his name? John Oliver.
Yeah.
The last week tonight.
I fucking hate that guy, by the way.
I do now too. But the first season of I thought the world of his first season. When he first came out, I thought, wow, this is a really good show. And one show highlighted that how cops were being overly geared up. They were buying military gear for cheap, on the cheap, and you had this police force in Maine that had a fucking tank, and it just seemed very much like cops were, on the loose. And so I kind of was like, fuck cops for a while. And my family on my mom's side was like, no, fuck you, because they're affluent white people. And I was like, well, fuck you. And then it just, now we don't talk anymore. I've since changed my mind about that.
I have too. I think, like I said, a lot of anti-government people go down this pathway. You kind of get aware to everything. And you, like I said, you look at these people as the arm of the state, the oppressors. I have a Mosin Nagant, and that's that old Russian rifle, and it shoots it shoots really big rounds, and it shoots bullets that I know can go through the police vest, and even if they're wearing plate carriers. So, when I was this edgy anarchist and libertarian, I was like, I called my Mosin Nagant my pig sticker, and I used to listen.
Cliche.
I used to listen to a ton of Tupac, and so I've changed quite a bit, like you, Auger. I've gone down the pathway where, like, I looked at cops as the enemy, and now I kind of more look at them as kind of having an impossible job.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way of doing it.
I feel they're scapegoated a lot, and I especially feel that there's a massive issue with citizens not understanding protocol and thinking that they have rights that they don't. For example, a lot of times now you're seeing these videos where people are in stores and they're being asked to leave and they're saying, I have a right to be here. No, you don't. The minute you get out, this is a private business. The minute you're asked to leave, whether you think it's for nothing or not, like, hey, I didn't do anything wrong, I shouldn't be asked to leave. That doesn't matter. Like, you've been asked to leave. You have a legal obligation now to leave. You have no right to stay there. And people who stand there and stand their ground, I'm like, I don't know why you're doing that. You're causing yourself more trouble than it's worth in the long run. You're risking something you really don't want to risk. You're on the wrong side legally. Just leave. Go take your business elsewhere. And then there's the non-compliance issue. Mm-hmm. There are too many times these people are like, I don't have to. Why are you trying to put cuffs on me? No, you don't get to ask that. Like, I mean, you can ask that, and you can certainly verbally protest what they're doing, but you don't get to physically stop a cop. You are on the wrong side of the law immediately. Like, you don't get to pull your hands away. You don't get to put your hands on the cops. You don't get to, physically resist. Like, none of that. You are on the wrong side. You immediately put yourself in fucking danger.
Yeah, and I mean, we could to wrap up the whole cop thing. Like, I understand that they have a hard job. I understand that they enforce a lot of shitty laws, and but generally, just being a kind person to them, even if they are in the wrong, it makes it go by so much smoother. Most of them appreciate you not being a scumbag, and so I thankfully grew out of that phase. But like I said, I think a lot of people kind of go through this phase, and I think it's helpful to talk about it. But kind of moving on, I came to understand that politics is like inherently off-putting topic to a lot of people. Everyone has an opinion, and not everyone wants to be lectured to by others. And I'm
sure.
And I'm also like a really cynical person, and this helps me kind of handle the enormity of how screwed up politics is. That I think when the average person kind of sticks their head in and sees pays attention to politics for a little bit, they get discouraged and they simply want to tune out and enjoy other things like sports or whatever. And I understand that, and I respect that, and I think it's really good to take breaks from this stuff if you're plugged in like me. So I know a lot of you guys listening every day. You wake up and consume whatever's in the news feed, and I just want to encourage that it's good to take a day off or 2 or 3.
Yeah, I started getting really into politics after the 2016 election, and I can't even remember because before that I really just didn't care, and I can't even remember what that was like.
Right?
I totally agree.
Go ahead.
I sort of paid attention, but nowhere near as closely, I don't think, as I did just about a couple of years prior to to this last election's primaries. I started really getting involved or paying close attention about 2014, I think.
Yeah. So and I think he probably disconnected.
No. I stopped because I didn't want to be a chatty Cathy and just take over.
Well, that's you. I feel like
tell.
I'm fucking Ben Shapiro here, just rattling point after point after
Hey,
point.
you're the interviewee, so that's how it's supposed to be.
That is how it's supposed to be.
All right. Well, so, I understand. And, like I said, I've been in especially when you're involved in dissident politics, it's very hard to unplug because you're aware of how fucking crazy things are. You're aware that, the United States and Russia are still aiming nuclear weapons at each other, and that the government has all of our dick pics and all this sort of stuff. And, it's very hard to just ignore this stuff to go back to reality. And this is the whole 4chan thing. These are normies, people who.
Oh, there goes gravity.
The fucking normies. So I got introduced to libertarianism, and about 2 years ago with the 2016 presidential election, I started getting very dissatisfied with libertarians in general, the same way I kind of did when, I was a socialist with Obama. And, I'm willing to explain what I think is wrong with libertarians. But do you guys have any other comments or questions first about, a younger Foy, or do you just want me to kind of move into it?
I kind of feel like there's a question on my mind, and I think it's a good place to bring it. And it might be kind of an interjection.
Sure, let's do it.
So, given you have been such a sort of a figure amongst us, kind of sort of a local celebrity. You started the Being Classically Liberal page. You started the Being Classically Liberal Republic.
Really quick, I didn't start the page. Someone else, Corey did. But yes, I've been with it since it's like right around when it got created. But go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's not my
I didn't
page.
know about that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I just assumed it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm the most active. Like I said, I'm an internet junkie, so I've taken advantage of this thing that's been created and built up. But go ahead with your with the point you were making. I'm sorry.
So a lot of us here are here because you're the interviewee. So a lot of our listeners, that's exactly why they're here. And a lot of us know each other because we met in your groups or group. I'm not sure how many groups you have. I know the Rebel History is yours, right?
Yeah, I'm part of two pages, Being Classically Liberal and the Rebel History, the page I created. In terms of groups, I think it's about 6 or 7 of them. And,
wow.
And I'm involved in a lot of other groups that aren't, where I'm not really the owner or the moderator. But yeah.
But in the time that I've spent, so I've been aware of you for more than a year, maybe a year and a half, something like that. And we've had brief interactions, but you get talked about frequently within the groups. And one of the things that comes up, and still does, I suppose, is there are those within your groups who seem to believe that you are a white nationalist.
Oh, did he just cut out? Adam, are you there? Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. All right. No, yeah. So I'm very glad he asked this question. And yes, I'm well aware of a lot of the people I associate with and, my history with 4chan and some of the things I talk about, when I say
fucking thing kicks me at the most inopportune times. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You got it out, though. So, yeah, people think I'm a white nationalist. What point did you have after that?
I wanted to hear what you would like to say to them. True, not true. Where did that come from? And sure. I'm going to let you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So this is a little more complicated than to just say yes or no. I will just say no. But let me address one thing. So besides white nationalist, another loaded phrase that's thrown out there is white supremacist. And, this is thrown out there by people, basically at anyone who has the courage to speak about the differences amongst ethnic groups. People, the whole Marxist egalitarian narrative is that we are all completely equal. You can't consider differences between the different racial groups that have gone through, tens of thousands of years of evolution. And so, I'm not going to apologize for me kind of talking about the differences between these ethnic groups. Like, for example, I believe Asian people, they have higher IQs than most people. They have really solid families. They commit less crime. Does that make me an Asian supremacist? No, like this is horse shit, this white supremacist term. So, just talking about kind of these differences and highlighting, this ethnic group has a whole fuck ton of problems. This one gets it right here. This one gets it wrong here. That kind of labels me. And, I'm a chauvinist for, Western civilization. I think Europeans, libertarianism, for example, a lot of the things we like and believe in, that came from Europeans, whether it didn't come from the continent in Africa, it didn't come from Asia, it didn't come from South America, it came from Europe. And, it just so happens that Europeans happen to be white people. So, I'm not going to apologize for that or back down. But regarding the white nationalism, this is another thing I'm certain that is said about me. And again, I'm not really interested in going out of my way to defend myself from these left-wing boogeyman terms. But just to be really clear about this, I'm not an ethnic nationalist, and I don't base my political views on ethnicity. But I do understand why a lot of people do. I think it's a really easy, logical conclusion people jump to. And, but it's not really controversial to me at all. And so, I can articulate this using two important libertarian concepts. First off is freedom of association. Forcing people to be multicultural is nonsense and tyrannical. You can't, you should be able to fire somebody or not serve somebody or do whatever you want if you're a bigot. I don't care.
Right.
I'm going to stick up for people I don't necessarily agree in. And, even before I kind of got pushed into this alt-right or 4chan category, when I was a basic bitch libertarian Ron Paul supporter, I got fucking called a racist or a white supremacist because I had the courage to say, actually, this person doesn't have to serve black people at their own business if they don't want to, or whatever reason you can make.
Right, but the argument isn't, and that's because people get emotionally respond to that, thinking that the argument you're making is we should be able to racially discriminate, and the idea, and that's not what you're trying to say. If I understand it correctly,
no, I think it's more that the difference between the ability to and whether it's right or wrong. Those are two separate questions.
But there shouldn't be, right, but there shouldn't, I think the argument is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Foy, the argument is you own your body, and if you own your body, you own your work, and you have the right to do with your work as you please. If that means you don't want to sell your work to gays or blacks, I can legitimately say, well, I disagree with that. I would do that, and I feel that that's kind of I judge you for it. But you should have the right to do that. Nobody should be telling you you have to do this. You holding you at gunpoint, forcing you to give something to somebody that you don't want to give them to, just because they don't agree with your idea as to why you don't want to give it to them. I don't agree with that. We're talking about freedom.
Yeah. And, everything you just said, Auger, it can be summed up with two things, with freedom of association and property rights. And so, yes, you own your property. You're allowed, you have freedom to associate with who you want to. And so, so me defending this stuff early in my libertarian career, I already got called these things. And this is before the whole alt-right thing. It got even famous is, there is an ethnic component of politics that I've learned about over the last 2 years. But even before I was aware of this, like I said, I got called, all of these horrible things just for expressing what I just did, property rights and freedom of association. And, specifically with ethnic nationalism or white nationalism, the other libertarian or classical liberal concept I can use to defend this is it's actually my personal favorite, and that is a government to be legitimate needs the consent of the governed. If the people don't consent to the government, then it's an illegitimate government. It's going to be tyrannical, and they have a right to abolish and make a new one. And so, it just so happens to be certain ethnic groups do not consent to being governed over by others. Like Like, do people really think that the Jews in Israel should let Arabs get in power and rule over them? What about what about the Native Americans? Should we just take away their tribal governments and land and let them be ruled over by whites again? Like this is ridiculous. Like, people are entitled to a government they consent to, and this can be broken down in a lot of different ways, and one of them is ethnically. Okay, so, and considering how like hysterical the left has been about white people, and how like Marxists have been basically labeled us as like the new oppressive class responsible for all of the world's problems. I'm willing to shake hands and find common cause with people I don't fully agree with, but to, fight back against a common enemy. So, I'm not going to yes, I'm friends with literal white nationalists. There's some of them in this Discord channel right now talking a lot of shit. So what I'm getting at is these ideas aren't controversial to me. I'm not afraid to talk about them. And I don't even fully endorse them, but it's going to get me labeled them, and I'm just not going to spend time or energy. It's like being called a racist. Like, I don't care that you're losing all of your.
That word has lost all meaning. Really, it's been thrown around so carelessly that it's worthless now. You're a racist. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But now, as far as freedom of association and property rights, I'm in full agreement with you there. Can I ask though? I'm curious. Where do you find yourself agreeing with white nationalists? And how do you define white nationalists? Are we talking about white supremacist groups? People who belong to white supremacist groups?
Yeah, so basically white nationalism, a better term for it is ethnic nationalism, and it's just basically making a state or a nation that's composed of people of a certain ethnic group. And, my beliefs are that, I want to give everybody the opportunity, not even just ethnic groups, I want religious groups, I want all sorts of different people to have different states and different nations. And so, so let's say there's a bunch of white people in whatever state, and they're a minority, and the blacks are in power and they're raising taxes, or let's say they're in South Africa, they're taking your fucking land. And I believe like those white people, they have the right to go migrate or go somewhere else and form their own government, and being, a government they consent to. And again, it doesn't even have to be the white thing or the racial component of this. It's just consent of the governed. So if you don't consent to a government, if a group of white people doesn't consent to a bunch of fucking transgenders and immigrants ruling over them, then they should go make their own government. And, I'm a big believer in secession and decentralized political power. I want to break up the United States, but go ahead.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yes, of course. Of course.
Wow.
And we can get into this if you want, but let's.
I kind of do, because I'm curious about that. Like I've always been. I don't know that I fit the label of libertarian or even classic liberal. I think in some ways I do, but in others I've come to believe that I'm a bit of a statist.
Yeah,
and those things kind of run contradictory to each other, from what I understand. They don't like each other. So I don't know. I think I kind of I do, but I don't. I'm not as politically well versed as maybe you are, but that's neither here nor there. I'd like to get into that, but first, when it comes to your statement about being ethnically governed. Right? Am I saying that right?
Just certain ethnic groups wanting to be governed over by their own group. Okay,
okay. So do you believe do you support and promote that with not just for whites but for all?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people in my circles, the whole white nationalism thing, they like hate Israel and they hate the Jews. But for me, it's like, well, no, the Jews have a right to have their own fucking state. And, you know, even the left wingers, they always say that, oh, Israel is apartheid. And I'm like, well, that might be a little bit true, but why the fuck would Jews want to be governed over by Arabs?
By Muslims? Yeah.
Do you think they're going to be nice to those fucking, if the Arabs get in power, are they going to be nice to the Jews? Yeah.
What's funny to me is twice in the last few decades, it's been the Jews, it's been the Israelis who've come to Palestine with a proposal saying, we're going to give back land. Let's go with a traditional split of everything based on, I believe, the whatever accord back in the 50s or 60s. And both times, the Palestinians came back saying, you give us everything or we want, it's all or nothing. We're not agreeing to this. We want you all dead. Like, rivers of blood will run through the streets. We're not agreeing to any of this. Like, they tried to compromise twice, and the Palestinians wouldn't do it because they want it all. And so I feel it's really unfair. I'm a bit of a pro-Israel.
Well, yeah.
But
so let me just
because
go ahead.
I'm judgment. I'm a bit of a.
Let me just be clear, though. So you Auger, believe that Jews have a right to have their own state and govern themselves and not be fucking governed.
Do.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I believe. And then you can take that. So, you know, the blacks have a right to do this if they want. You know, Asians, white.
I kind of feel like there's certain actions that are taking place in the country today that lend itself to the actions support that they believe that too. For example, this whole controversy with black students in universities wanting their own ceremony, like graduation ceremony, and then wanting their own all black safe spaces or some, all black student movement or union. To me, that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And, like I said, people have, I think, like I said earlier, it's not really, this stuff isn't that controversial to me because I think a lot of lazy people, this is an easy logical conclusion to jump to, like, well, most white people vote for Republicans and limited government. So I'm going to be a white nationalist. And, me, I'm a little more.
Didn't Obama blow that out of the water? I mean, can you really continue to say that most of us vote for white?
Well, I was just about to get into this. No, there's a ton of shitty white people that are shitlibs that vote for fucking horrible progressive communist policies. So that's why I'm not an ethnic nationalist. I'll shake hands with a black man who believes in a decentralized capitalist society, and I'll help him fucking kill a bunch of communists. I don't care. I care about your this is something.
So do you support the meritocracy as opposed to an identity politics, or I mean, what does that matter? Does that not matter more?
So I'm trying to think of how I can keep this simple. Basic. Okay, the simplest way I can explain my personal political beliefs is you need intermediate levels of power to protect you against absolute power or rule. So basically, like a decentralized form of government. So I get this. This is like obviously not my original ideas, but I get this from Anglo-Saxon and English history. So just an example, let's look at a baron or an earl versus a king. So the king is representative of a absolute power, absolute government, and then you have different levels, like a baron or an earl that the people kind of show more loyalty to, and then in that intermediate level of power stand up to the king. So this is what happened in 1215 with the Magna Carta, is the barons said, fuck off, king, you're acting like a cunt, and we're going to restrict your power. And this is how we got a lot of the liberties we talk about. So I believe in decentralized intermediate levels of power, and this is why I'm a big proponent of states' rights in the United States. And so, like,
I agree.
And so, when you're saying I just want.
No, I'm curious. I just want to ask a quick question. You say you're for states' rights. Does that not kind of make you a statist?
Well, yeah, no, I was willing to talk about why, I have a lot of problems with libertarianism and why I've kind of gone away from like that doctrine of, personally, I believe that the state is it's part of humanity. You're never ever going to get rid of it. Human beings create states. And so, there's an evolutionary standpoint to this is that, you can try and fucking live in Ancapistan if you really want to, but another state or someone else that has this kind of more organized structure of society, they're going to come around and they're going to fucking make you bend the knee. Okay. So I believe you need a state of like-minded people, and the state has to be of people, the people of the state have to consent to it. And yeah, you use this state
to protect against the brigands and the highwaymen.
Exactly. Barbarians and shit like that. Okay. Like I said, you can fucking live in Ancapistan if you want. But like the primitive origins of the state are armed men establishing perimeters to protect their families and property. And, I understand I understand government is awful. It's immoral. It makes a lot of mistakes. But I'm not an anarchist. Like, I believe the state is necessary. No. I believe the state's necessary for humans to defend themselves. So yes, I am a statist by fucking retarded ANCAP's terminology.
Okay. I'm a statist in that way, too. So... I guess I perhaps, like I said, I'm not as well versed, so I'm not sure if that's really what I am or what have you. But I kind of want to get back to what we were talking about before
with libertarians, or
no. I want to get back to your association with white nationalists. What is it that we were talking about? What you agree with them on, and that's how we got onto the ethno state, as it were. Am I right about that?
Yeah, or just ethnic nationalism.
Ethnic nationalism.
Yeah.
Okay. What other things do you agree with them on? Are there others?
Yeah. So, I mean, other than I just believe they have a right to make their own state, like Marxist and communism. So it used to be the have-nots versus the haves, like, the productive class. And so what they've done is they've made this really simple, is they just make white people the oppressive class. And so, a lot of these white nationalists, they're really anti-communist. So, I'm willing to put aside our differences and shake hands and say, yeah, fuck these communists. Fuck these guys who want to transgender children. You can have your own state. I'll have my own state. But we have this common enemy here that I'm not. And so a lot of the white nationalists.
So would you say that you share a conservative perspective? Is that what you're talking about?
I share an anti-communist perspective.
Okay, that's fair.
Let me be clear here. So, besides the Confederacy, another topic that got me in a lot of trouble last year was defending Rhodesia, which is was a country in Africa. And the United States has spent like an untold number of money and lives on preventing the spread of communism throughout the world. And when a tiny nation in Africa that was surrounded and continually attacked by communist groups, funded and armed by the Soviet Union, the United States and public opinion turned their back on them because in this scenario, the communists were black and they were trying to overthrow a white capitalist regime. And I really don't give a fuck about your ethnicity, but merely your political ideology. I will always oppose communism, even if it gets me called a racist.
Right. So in this particular instance, I just want to make it clear, had the roles been reversed, had it been a primarily black country being surrounded by white communists attacking them, then you would support the black country.
Yeah, absolutely. Fuck yeah, man. I hope they kill any as fucking white commies.
So I mean, skin color means nothing to you. It's just the political perspective.
I mean, depending on how much I'm drinking, like, I barely consider communist people. I consider them like a fucking parasite. I consider these people.
You know, you're kind of right.
So, but yeah, and you know, I can explain something really quick too with regarding white nationalists and why a lot of them like fascism and Hitler. And, you know, these people are like,
okay, I'll hear you out.
Yeah, they're like, so who was like besides the United States, who are some of the best anti-communist and communist killers in history? It's the fucking Germans. Well, yeah. Right? Yeah, no, you got me there. But, sorry. You know, so these people, they look at, they're like, oh, I fucking hate communism. Communists hate white people. Well, where's the historic precedent of, you know, fucking killing communists? Well, it's the fucking Germans. It's the Wehrmacht. It's the Nazis. And you know, there's a lot more to that. But like, I hate the National Socialists or the fascists. There's some of them. Yeah, I was just going to
say that my issue with that, while as much as I'm a huge opposer of communism, I tend to see my issue with the Nazis is like, yeah, but you're not much better. Like, you're just, you guys are fighting for the same throne, really. This is what you know what I mean? Like, there's not much difference.
Yeah, well, you have to look at the time period that it occurred in. And communism was like this idea at the time. It was like a global revolution. You know, when it happened in Russia, Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky was like, okay, we got Russia. Now let's go all throughout Europe. And so this is where the nationalists. Right. This is where the nationalists come in. And what were the Nazis? National Socialists. And so they were nationalists, and they said, the fuck with these commies. And you know, but basically anyone. You know, like, for example, the early spread of communism, which I just covered a week ago, it stopped after World War I thanks to Poland. And because, like I said, when Lenin and Trotsky tried to spread communism, Poland's right next to Russia. Poland, against all odds, beat them off and stopped the spread of communism. And I've read
it's so funny to me when you read the history of Poland and you understand just how precarious their position geographically is. They're the fucking gateway. You know what I mean? Like they're the road into or out of Russia. And you know, that kind of makes them kind of a target, and they've been able to manage that pretty well, and yet still they manage to get this reputation for, you know, Polacks and the jokes that come with it and how dumb they are. Yeah. And it's like, man, you guys got done dirty. That's a raw deal.
Yeah, no, I think Poland is on the right side of history a lot of the times. And but what I was getting at is me expressing like, yeah, fucking Poland stopped, you know, the communists. Well, people would be, you know, people against this were like, oh, Foy, you're fucking pro-nationalism, pro-fascist Poland stopping the communists. I'm like, I don't even think that those arguments or comments are true, but yeah, the fuck right I am. I am supporting Poland stopping the spread of communism. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I can't think of anybody. The proof is in the pudding to me when it comes to things like this European Union. I'm totally against it, and they're very much fighting to hold on to their power. There's with Brexit and with things that are happening and with the way Poland's been behaving ever since the refugee crisis. You know, there's definitely, I think, on their end, the sense that we need to really tighten the reins right now because we run the risk of being dismantled. And this is our life for a lot of those who hold positions in the European Union. That's their life's work, and it's hard to give up something like that. And I think you're going to see them fight tooth and nail here come, you know, real soon. And Poland, they've had zero terrorist attacks, zero, you know, their rape and crime rates haven't increased at all. And it's right there in the pudding. It's what none of the other European countries want to admit to, which is, it is directly related to this refugee crisis and this immigration influx, which I don't consider an immigration. This to me is an invasion. And I know that's not very PC to say.
Did you hear that, everybody? Auger just far right nationalist and fascist. So,
but here's the thing. It's not because it's not skin color. It's culture. You have a whole culture coming in, not wanting to assimilate to the culture that exists there, but instead, with every action they take, it's obvious that they want to erase the culture that exists and replace it with their own. And that I don't agree with. Why would you do that? Like, if you're coming to somebody's house, you don't get to fucking, hey, I'm going to start moving all this shit out, and I'm going to start putting my stuff in, and when I'm done, this will just be mine. And then you guys should probably leave. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're here for a week. You're a guest. Get the fuck out. You don't get to do that. And this is a culture war. As much as everybody wants to start screaming and spouting racism, I disagree with that entirely. I've talked too much. Let's hear what you have to say about that.
Well, we've been all over the place here, but I appreciate you bringing
That's
up.
how it goes.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the European Union because it coincides well with what I believe in, and I think there's a lot of correlation between the European Union and then the American Union that we're all part of. All of the states in America are part of, and the European Union is very new and young. And, you start seeing Poland and Hungary and maybe a couple other countries, but those two specifically, they are like anti-centralization of the EU. And the EU is the embodiment. It represents a centralization of political power. And Poland's like, fuck you, EU. We're perfectly fine without your bullshit immigration policy or rules. And Hungary is doing the same thing. So what's happening is you're seeing all of these articles published about how Poland and Hungary are far-right nationalist, fascist, racist regimes. And it's really what it is it's anti-centralization of political power, which is, my fundamental belief. And I believe in our lifetime, guys, we're going to see this. We're going to see the EU. They're already working on it. They're building an army. In the EU, just like the American Union had to do, the EU is going to have to use force to keep this union together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they've been trying to get a standing army of their own for a while now. Didn't some documentation come out just a while back that proved that, like, there was
I think he got cut off, but yeah, there is the funding for it's on the books. They already have a number of aircraft and stuff. But do any of the other co-hosts have any comments or questions so far? I know we're kind of going back and forth.
Yeah,
I might have to get some water really quick, but go ahead.
I don't know. Like, it is scary. So what do they have on the books right now for an EU military?
The legislation is there for the EU to have their own army. Basically, all of the European states contribute to it. So, Germany is going to provide a tank battalion. Britain's going to provide a squadron of fighters. I'm
so against this. I'm so against it.
This is.
I'm so fucking
terrifying
against
this, for one.
Well, we're in the earliest stages of this, but it's eventually going to happen. There's, government.
That's if they manage. Here's the thing. That's if they manage to keep themselves from collapsing within the next few years. It's going to go like these next few years are going to be very telling, in my opinion. It's sink or swim these next few years. Either in 5 years, we're going to say the EU doesn't even exist anymore, or in 5 years, we're going to go, we need to do something about this EU.
Yeah, well, Brexit was basically a fraud. I mean, those people voted to leave, and it's not happening.
It still hasn't happened.
It's unbelievable. But like, there are articles. I've expressed this on Being Classically Liberal, and I've said I'm going to say I'm always going to stand with Poland or Hungary or whatever other nation has the balls to tell the centralized political authority the fuck off. And this is why.
Absolutely. I absolutely stand with. And how can you deny it when you have the statistics? Like, how can you be mad at Poland for saying, nope, not doing it, when the fact that they haven't done it and they've not done what EU has asked them to do for since 2015, and all their statistics show that they had it right. Again, no terrorist attacks, no crime increases in rape and theft and murder. Like, you can't, how can you be mad at them for that?
Yeah, and you're just talking purely about the immigration aspect of this. Yeah, there's a lot more. I mean, why would the people of Poland why should they be dictated and governed by some bureaucrat in the EU they didn't even vote for, that's in like fucking France or something?
Exactly.
So, but Auger, I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is a nice bridge. The European Union is why all the arguments we just made is exactly why I'm against the American Union and why I'm pro-Confederate. So I'm willing to get into this this conversation. But unless you have anything else you want to ask me or talk about, I know we've been through a lot here.
We have, but it's been so great.
I'm enjoying myself.
I know, same here. So would you say that there are things that you do? I've asked you a couple of times now. What do you agree with these white nationalists that you say that you're associated with or even friends with? What do you disagree with them on?
I believe that that the color of your skin or your ethnicity makes you a redeeming person. Okay, I grew up in a town of a bunch of white boys that fucking act like a bunch of gangbangers. Okay, and it has nothing. Yeah, so I know for every amazing white person I know that's an upstanding citizen, I know another fucking white person that's fucking trash to mirror. I'm not. Yeah, so I'm not. I don't believe your race makes or breaks you, although I think it contributes more to like your culture. So yeah, this race in this region with this culture, well, yeah, you can pretty much, you can make a good estimate about how they're going to behave, how they're going to do, how they're going to. So, but yeah, that's what I disagree with. I mean, these people, so the white nationalists, they think that that socialism will be just fine if it's all white people. And,
can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
On socialism, do you believe socialism is just a polite way to say communism?
Well, historically, socialism, it came about, in response to communism. Like, back then, the governments were like,
communism,
oh, wow.
White.
Yeah, so basically what it is the communists were getting really popular. There were revolutions in a couple countries, and it scared the shit out of the existing nations. They're like, you know what, maybe we should adopt some of their policies and have the state or the people control the means of production. So yes, you're right. It is communism light. And, I don't even want to be an ideal and say that, socialism never works.
Well, here's the thing: is my perspective is, would you? Here's what I think: socialism will always lead to communism.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I think that in a smaller on a smaller scale, socialism or socialist. Let's just be specific. Your socialist programs, they can work. Okay, so what do all the fucking communists in the United States and Bernie Sanders supporters like to point out? They like to say, look at Scandinavia, look at Norway, look at Finland. And so, let's look at Norway. Norway as a country, I think, has between 5 and 7 million people. Okay, so I'm not going to deny that, maybe a universal healthcare system might be better run on a smaller nation and a more homogenous nation like that than fucking all 300 million. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we're like 350 million people. Not only that, but Scandinavia has a lot of money to spare when it doesn't have to pay for its own fucking defense.
Yeah.
That's our money. Like we're paying for their military defense. They don't have to. So they get to take that money that they would normally funnel into that,
which is why I also find it really funny that the EU is talking about, like, oh yeah, this European country is going to contribute militarily. It's like, how? You haven't been able to contribute to yourselves. Like, what are you doing?
I almost picture the EU going to each of these individual countries and going, okay, so you're going to give us this much of whatever the U.S. is giving you. Give us this percentage of a chunk of what the U.S. is giving you. Give it to us. And then we're going to use that to make our military. Like, fuck off. You don't get to do this. I want us so badly to shut them down. We don't need this NATO bullshit anymore. I think that we should go, look, defend yourselves.
Yeah. And so, again, like, just pointing out, I'm not like an ideologue or socialism. Fucking problems with it. I think it's immoral in principle, but like, let's say like I said, I view the United States as how it was originally intended, as a federation of different states. I don't view us as all one United State in people. And so let's look at Wyoming. Wyoming's only 500,000 people in the entire fucking state. If those people wanted to have their own public healthcare system, I don't think it would be a complete failure. Like I said, I think the more local the form of government, the better. And so, back to what you originally asked, though, Auger, yes, this is where I disagree with kind of the white nationalists of where they think, just because white people do X, Y, and Z, that it's X, Y, and Z is going to be completely phenomenal. No, I don't believe that at all.
Well, that's right. That's right. Okay. Do you feel that, given the stigma that comes with white nationalists, what makes you okay with associating with them? Do you feel that even though they have things there's things you disagree with them on, do you feel that that's not enough of a stigma for you to say, I can't associate with you even if I agree with you on certain things? Obviously.
Well, the negative stigma that comes towards this ethnic nationalism comes from fucking communists and comes from left-wingers. And I really don't care about what left-wingers or communists have to say. I want to live in a completely separate society and nation than these people. And if there just so happens to be a group of people who I don't fully agree with, who are the literal, demon or devil to these communists, well, I'm gonna be a little bit more interested in what they have to say, or maybe finding common ground with them. Just like Rhodesia or the Confederacy, which is often portrayed as like a white supremacist nation or view. There's a lot more to this than just this fucking boogeyman of being called a racist.
Right.
So
right, yeah. It doesn't fit into your 140 characters.
Yeah, exactly. So
I totally agree.
Like, I'm not.
As far as nuance goes, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. So but I understand. I don't go out of my way to pander or to deny these labels. I just don't think it's a good use of my time, and I really don't want to fucking care.
Right.
Like I said, I want to live separate from these people. I don't want to share a system of government, with fucking communist or Bernie Sanders supporters or whatever, Black Lives Matter, whatever we want to, this whole left wing people who want to centrally plan the society, whether it's for racist shit like affirmative action or whether it's for socialist shit like universal health care. I don't want to live with you, okay? I don't want to, we could be friendly, but we're definitely not countrymen, okay? I think trying to keep us together, force everybody to live together, it's very, it's immoral, and it's going to lead to a disaster. When you're forcing all these people to be together, well, eventually one group's going to want to come out on top and run everything. And I think that's...
Well, and I think that's because there was a time when it wasn't that way. And I think the difference, given everything we've talked about so far, I think the difference is that there's definitely an anti-American sentiment and sort of that sort of a movement that's growing within our own country. It has been for some time, and that's kind of what I refer when I talk about social Marxism. That's what I'm referring to, is that sort of anti-American sentiment that to me is really prevalent among our universities, and I think it's been that way since about the 60s. And I think we're pumping out, we're paying to have our children get indoctrinated into what is, Pretty Little Soldiers, or they all think alike, and they all parrot the same ideologies or talking points, and they all use the same jargon. The what is it? Racism is prejudice plus power. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Knock it off.
Well, let's just look at really simply what America represented. America represented Europeans fleeing the old world, which was, ruled by a bunch of fucking cousin fucking monarchs, and settling in a new world for a new way of life. And so what's happening today is they're trying to make America, the new world, more like the old world. We should be like the Scandinavian countries. We should be more like Europe.
How hilarious! You're right. How hilarious is that? We left so that we could be less like Europe, and now we have people in power going, we should be more like Europe. Are you out of your fucking mind?
Yeah, and we're so young still as a country, as a nation, as an empire that. It's hard to put this into perspective. So yes, the people that come to the United States and want to make it more like the country they left, well, fuck off. You're not welcome here, in my opinion. And I agree. Yeah,
I think assimilation is imperative, and I think that we had the reason that we didn't have these issues before is because there was sort of an agreed upon American culture. You could, like the family that you said you lived next to or nearby, who came here legally, and it took them 10 years, and they were very proud of that, and they were very pro-American. That's the American culture, and that I agree with. Like, it doesn't matter where you came from, what you look like, what color your skin is. Are you of the same mind I am culturally, that this is America, we're united in that, and we should be proud of that.
Yeah, you sound like a right-wing extremist, Auger. So I don't know what I'm doing on this radio show with right-wing extremists.
Yeah, geez, like Auger, known racist over here, spouting pro-America stuff. Like I get called racist
all the time. Well, you should, that PFP that I have. But I think we've talked a lot about this. I kind of want to, before we run out of time, I want to go over some moments in Facebook history with you.
That's fine. I'll just be clear. I'm fine with going over time too. If you want to make this a little longer than normal. I know there's a lot of people here and listening, but I'm completely fine. I got nothing else going on tonight. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, just so that everybody knows, then what we'll do is probably do the last maybe 20 minutes or 15 minutes of the show, where we'll take questions if there are any, and then we'll end the show officially. But then we'll start an after hours kind of for however long everybody wants to hang around, and that's a much more loose structure. We'll just shoot the shit and talk about whatever.
Yeah, that works for me.
Great. But in regards to Facebook, I kind of want to go over some highlights. There are some fun little questions. Now, can we talk about your friend Wrinkle?
I mean, I really don't want to choose sides in any debate.
No. And that's not it at all. I'm just curious to kind of get your perspective. I don't want to. I'm not asking you to choose sides.
Yeah. Okay. I can do this. Yeah.
Right. So you remember the whole thing with Wrinkle, which there was kind of a two-parter, or it happened twice, where Wrinkle seemed to kind of use his authority within the group to kind of do what he pleased. The group kind of became his playground, as it were, twice that I can remember. Which personally is what led me to kind of splinter off. I think that's the case for some others as well. What's your memory of that, and what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so let me just be upfront. I mean, I'm okay with Wrinkle playing around and having a good time. Anyway, but let me just be clear regarding the group. And I've been part of internet groups for decades. And,
Sure.
this is not an uncommon occurrence. And if, 95% of you people listening, if you were given a...
You people. What do you mean, you people?
If you were given authority over thousands of people, you would find some excuse or justification to use it on others. And yeah, some of the admins of the group were guilty of this. Some of them wanted to fucking ban James Bailey and shit. And, and it's not just them. These are my friends. These are my colleagues. But what I'm getting at is anyone who has this authority, they're willing to sacrifice you in order to validate their own position. And so, I just want to be clear that you or others who are claiming, like, I just think this is better. Or you guys are claiming like, oh, well, why did Wrinkle do this thing that's part of fucking human nature, exercising authority given to him? I don't think most people are better than that. I think most people have given power. They won't be a George Washington and step down or not want to use it. They'll be a Napoleon because life is so much more fun that way. And
And certainly it was. I know it was fun for Wrinkle. I'm positive of that.
I enjoy it. I think it was a little. I mean, I invited everyone down, so
Does anybody hold on just real quick? Does anybody else hear him coming across as sort of robotic?
Only in the last 2 seconds.
How about now? Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. The fucking the Russians are here. The NSA. We're being fucking hacked. But
everybody's coming across as very robotic for me. So, Adam, I'm going to hand over. I'm going to hand the talking stick to you. I'm going to back out. I'll come back and say a minute and a half. I just want to clear the thing out and see if I can reboot it, and then the sound will go back.
You got it.
All right, so
you got it.
All right. Bye-bye.
And I just want to be clear really quick, too. So, yeah, at first when this happened, I realized you guys formed your own groups. And, Wrinkle caused a secession and a bunch of separatists. And it was mostly the most active people. And at first I was a little upset about it. I'm like, well, there goes fucking 10% of the most active contributors to the group. But in my own personal beliefs, I really don't care. I think that's a good thing. I'm glad you got it. Was only inevitable that something like this would happen, and you guys would form your own groups and your own communities. And what I'm really happy about is some people have started their own pages that are liked by thousands of people and all this. So I'm at first it was like, oh, this is fucking drama. This is pissing me off. But looking back on it, I really don't care, guys. I'm a busy person. I spend a lot of time on the internet. But, this I don't hold any of this stuff personal.
Yeah, and it kind of also goes back to your whole consent of the governed kind of spiel.
Yeah.
It's multiple small communities. There's nothing wrong with that.
My favorite part of that whole debacle is that you ended up having to play Lincoln.
Yes, I was like, I do not consent to y'all leaving. I'll bring you back in this fucking group. But we've been talking for 2 hours, and I haven't even talked about the American Civil War.
Let's segue into that. You tried to earlier. Let's actually have that conversation. So,
we can do that. So, this is my favorite topic in American history because it is I just think it's a wonderful and tragic story. And I also believe it's our most crucial moment in history as Americans. I mean, I'm blown away by the fact this story has all of the characters that would make a phenomenal HBO or Netflix series. But, we don't get that. And I think it's a huge red flag with this topic is the fact that, if you go outside the window of allowable opinion, you're kind of bullied into, only accepting one way that this all happened. And, but basically, I think people and libertarians, you fall down this rabbit hole eventually. And, when I first learned about like what Lincoln and the federal government did, I used to just like be upfront and edgy about it to spark a conversation. But after kind of like years of reading and learning about this, I'm getting better at able to kind of break it down and explain it and not be so, it's not such a fucking edgelord or, trolling. But basically, to look through American political history and theory, you'll notice there's two sides. And one way to categorize these two sides is the Jeffersonian versus Hamiltonian view of the American government. So Jefferson was the farmer from the South advocating a more like decentralized government worldview. And Hamilton had the banking connections and was from New York and advocated for a national and more centralized government. And the other way to categorize these two sides is the Federalist versus the Anti-Federalist. And the Federalists wanted to replace the Articles of Confederation with a more centralized government. And they wrote famous essays that are some of the greatest political literature ever written in American history. And, most you guys should read
absolutely.
this. You guys, like, literally, there's essays on the founders saying, hey, this is what we want the government to be and how it should work. And that's available for everybody to read. But, I'm certain that 90% of all Americans don't even look through these. But what's unknown to a lot of people is that the Anti-Federalists wrote their own counter essays, and they're just as good. And they predicted everything that would go wrong with this more centralized government from ratification of the Constitution. And so, how I used to be edgy and rile people up was basically talking about how the wrong side won the Civil War. And this is why my profile picture and my pseudonym is associated with Robert E. Lee. But now that I'm further down this rabbit hole, I'm going to start focusing on and saying how that actually ratifying the Constitution that conservatives love and preach about, mind you, that was a pretty horrible mistake because it allowed this more centralized government that rules over us today. But, really quickly, Go ahead. I'll let you guys.
Yeah. So I'm also a history major, or I am a history major, and I haven't seen too much about this Articles of Confederation other than like I knew that they existed. I knew the general basis of it, where the states were very optional members, in my opinion, of the federal government. So do you think like could the Federation have survived under the Articles of Confederation then?
I mean, the Articles of Confederation had a lot of problems, and it wasn't perfect. And basically, one of the hugest problems of this form of government was dealing with the veterans from the Revolutionary War. They were promised pay, they were promised pensions, and the states in this loose confederation, they didn't want to fucking pay money to the central government. And so, I'm not saying they were perfect, but as the Anti-Federalists articulated, they're like, we are so young. I mean, the Articles of Confederation, it didn't even last 10 years. I think it was maybe 5 to 8 years. And the Anti-Federalist argument is we're so young. Why are we going to ratify this more centralized form of government? Let's tweak the one we have now. And, there were ways to tweak the Articles of Confederation, in the guidelines of it. And the Philadelphia Convention and the Federalist and ratification of the Constitution was like arguably a coup. They ignored it. The articles expressed that all 13 states have to consent to changing the Confederation, and the ratification of the Constitution said only 9 states had to ratify to create the Union. So basically, like, what the Federalists did, let's say like Napoleon or Caesar did this, like, hey, I'm creating a new government, that's more centralized because it's just in our best interest, it would be looked at as like a really negative thing. And all this stuff I'm talking about, if you guys are really interested in it, the definitive view of this is you read Charles Beard. He's a historian, and his book and economic interpretation of the Constitution of the United States was like the main history book that was in college and high schools, and it really clearly defines the Confederation versus the Constitution. But yeah, so I don't think the articles are perfect. I'm not going to say that, I'm just not going to make that argument, but I'm going to say that, they weren't the worst thing in the world. They just needed to be tweaked. And, the Federalists and Alexander Hamilton, and I'm fucking glad that douchebag got shot in the stomach, because he was very disingenuous about, it's only, basically once the Constitution got ratified, Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists used all of these arguments we see today by the Democrats, the broad language in the Constitution. They could use it to justify everything.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like the first instance of the left side, shifting the field goals for us. But I'll turn it back over to Auger since he's here, and he can fire away with some questions.
Yeah, Auger.
No. That was on me. Everybody started coming out Matrixy. Remember the Matrix? That one scene when he's sitting there by the mirror, and the mirror turns into goo and goes down his throat, and he goes, "Oh!" and his voice turns all kind of robotic.
Great segue.
That's what you all sound like, or did. So I had to restart everything, and now you sound fine. So I do have a couple of questions. Dinesh D'Souza makes the argument that I'm kidding. He makes the argument that the Civil War was not so much the North versus the South as it was the Republicans versus the Democrats, because the Northern Democrats supported the Southern Democrats when it came to maintaining slavery laws and maintaining control over the South.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you.
Would you agree with that?
I'm glad you brought this up, and yeah, part of that is true. So, the war, the American Civil War, was not popular at all in the first year of it. A lot of the Northern Democrats were like, "What the fuck are we doing?" With this, and mind you, the North was getting their ass kicked for the first 2 years of the war. So, yeah, so
because the North was taking it like it was a joke. I mean, what was it? The very first battlefield, you had Northerners picnicking on the sidelines.
Absolutely. Yeah.
they were like, "Oh, we're here for the show." Like, bitch, this isn't a joke. I will kill you.
And the Southerners fucking killed them. Ran them all the way back to Washington, D.C. But, if you guys want some real amazing literature and speeches from like a Northern Democrat, they were called the Copperheads, by the way. That's what you would look up, the Copperheads and the resistance to Abraham Lincoln. And the most famous one was an elected congressman from Ohio named Clement. I can't say his last name. It's Vallandigham or something. And this was an elected congressman, and basically every time the North got their ass kicked, he wrote or gave these speeches, saying, "Is it really fucking worth it to force the South to be in a union with us? We just lost 10,000 people." Well, what did Abraham Lincoln do? Well, at first he threw him in fucking jail, an elected congressman. He exiled him. And that's
I mean, Lincoln made it I don't think it was ever. He made it well known, didn't he, that his primary focus was the preservation of the Union, and he didn't care how he had to get it.
Absolutely. And so, but yeah, I just wanted to highlight Clement Vallandigham, and you guys will look up if you're really interested in learning about this on your own. But with Dinesh D'Souza, so I was pretty neutral on this guy for a while, but he is basically, I'm going to be rude here. I might regret what I'm about to say, but this is like a fucking immigrant from India coming here, and he's basically telling, Republicans, "No, you're not the real racist. It's the Democrats." And it's such a childish and simple view to have. There's a lot. It's more complicated than that, and it's more nuanced. And yes, the Democrats.
Do you disagree with so you don't agree that he's right on that?
Well, I would agree with so what the whole thing that Dinesh D'Souza is trying to promote is that the Republicans, basically that the war was a good thing, and that the Republicans, carried out this good war to end slavery, and it was the Democrats who were racist and against it. So therefore, the Democrats today are the real racists, and Republicans freed the slaves. And no, it's way more complex than that.
That's fair.
And as I was stating earlier, once you understand these two sides of American political theory, the Federalist versus the Anti-Federalist, or decentralization versus centralization.
Okay, so that's that. I think you just answered my question for me, because what I was going to ask was, how do you rectify, being against the leftists, who essentially are liberals and Democrats, but then supporting those who were, secessionists, anti-federalists, considering that they were, again, Democrats and liberals.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of flipped, and it's hard to. It's hard to say with the party politics here. So in the start, the Republican Party in the 1800s became was a product of the Whig Party. Okay, the Whig Party.
Right, they stem from the Whigs, right?
Yeah. So the Whig Party failed. Well, what were the Whigs? The Whigs wanted all of this pro-centralized federal government, internal improvements. They were the children of Alexander Hamilton, and
so they wanted big government.
So what I'm getting at is the Whigs and the Republicans historically were the progressive party that wanted to push society towards these perceived goals. And I was willing to break down kind of what the left versus right is. I never even got into it, but basically, let me just explain this really quick, because this is where a lot of libertarians, they find themselves in this trap saying right versus left doesn't matter, man, or it's not real, man. And, I thankfully grew out of this and was proven wrong by the fact that the left versus right is actually a real historical and political phenomena that's been categorized mostly since the French Revolution. And just to be really quick about this, the left side of the political spectrum is always making demands and trying to push society towards goals, whereas the right is trying to answer these demands and preserve society and tradition from the less progression. So with the French Revolution, for example, the left wanted to abolish the monarchy. Okay. And the right was like, okay, we can probably do that. A king is kind of a silly concept. But then the left was like, okay, now the church and religion. And, they keep going as far as they can and push these demands for perceived social justice. So what I'm getting at is, historically, the Republican Party were left-wing. They wanted to push society towards goals. And it was the Democrats that were more conservative, right-wing, trying to preserve the old way. And I'm not necessarily saying, I don't want to be too much of an ideologue. Yes, sometimes the left has real grievances, and sometimes the right that's trying to preserve is wrong. But, just looking at the Republican Party briefly, if you guys are familiar with Teddy Roosevelt, that guy was a fucking progressive left-wing lunatic who talked about predatory wealth, and he was known for busting up capitalist monopolies, and he was a Republican. Okay. And, the party didn't really switch until the Republicans kind of became the anti-establishment, more anti-progressive party when FDR, that little fucking shitbag in a wheelchair who served 4 terms, transitioned this country for a while. So, no, I think the parties did change, and you can look at this. And one last thing I'm going to post in the chat here. A lot of people don't know about this, but I was blown away learning about this.
Sure.
Abraham Lincoln and Karl Marx were fucking pen pals. Okay, they wrote letters to each other, and
no fucking way.
Yeah. So Karl Marx was a journalist, and he wrote articles in favor of the war. And so, it's just this topic is so backwards where, conservatives, they want a virtue signal like, oh, fucking, how dare you, you're traitors, how dare you, but, rebel against America and the government. And they want a virtue signal like how loyal they are, how nationalist they are. And, like I've talked about ad nauseum, I believe you have to consent. A government needs consent of the people. And just to summarize, this whole topic and why Dinesh D'Souza is fucking wrong about the Republicans and the war being a good thing is the bottom line is I believe people have a right to abolish a government they don't consent to. And that's what it says in the Declaration of Independence. And I understand if you have problems with the Declaration of Independence or you say it's not, part of law.
That's why I've always felt that there's a lot of nuance that gets overlooked or dismissed when it comes to the Civil War, because I see glory and horror on both sides.
Yeah,
not just in deeds, but in cause. I'm all for states' rights, and I'm all for small government. And I can get behind that idea. I can see that as being a motivating factor and stand behind it. But I also see the ultimate need, and this is where you and I might differ, considering that you've stated earlier that you're for breaking up the Union. I see the need for the preservation of the Union. I see how that was it was imperative, especially so early, and especially when we were still so very vulnerable, that to see a split like that was like blood in the water to some of the foreign powers. And I feel like, yes, had Lincoln agreed to a secession, yeah, fine, go do your own thing. We would have been pitted against each other by foreign agents, or we would have been broken up. Divide and conquer. We did half the job for our enemies, and we still had some major enemies.
Yeah,
and I just go ahead.
I agree with you, Auger, and everything you just said there. You know who also made those arguments is George Washington. So George Washington and a lot of the Americans at the time after the Revolution, they were terrified that England, France, Germany, Spain, they were going to kind of divide up these American states and get us to fight against each other. And so, so you have a reasonable concern, and I understand it.
And it's not just crazy talk either. That's the thing, is that a lot of people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people seem to have this concept when it comes to the Revolutionary War that we quote unquote won, and we didn't really. What we did is we fought long enough and hard enough that England went, fine, you know what, it's easier for us if we just go away. You guys are gonna, you don't have, you're young, you're ignorant, you don't know what you're doing, you don't have what it takes, and you're going to fuck yourselves, and you're going to be destitute and alone and vulnerable and tired and cold and hungry, and you're going to come crying to mama, and we're going to come back and we're just going to take it all back anyway. And we'll just wait for that. Instead of wasting our resources on you fucking peasants, we're going to let you starve and figure it out for yourself that you can't fucking do what you claim you're going to do. Like, go ahead and try. You're going to fucking fail. And then we don't need to waste man hours and manpower and lives for you to figure that out.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a complete ideologue, even though sometimes I can be. But I do believe there are some moments in history when centralizing political power is the right thing to do. And this normally happens in a crisis, okay? So what was the crisis for the Americans? Independence. Here come the British soldiers. They're imposing all this horse shit on us. They're across the ocean. We don't consent to the government. Let's all centralize ourselves to fight them off. Okay, I get that. But this is also where the conspiracy side of me kicks in, because the government and rulers always have an incentive for there to be a crisis to justify, the centralization of political power, to justify, so what we just talked a lot of shit about the European Union. What created the European Union? The World War. So this crisis comes about, and this justifies centralized power. So,
do you think then would you agree then that there are times where crises are fashioned in order to lead to that eventuality?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where that centralized power is desired, and with this knowledge of, crises tend to make that happen. What you would call a wag the dog or false flag.
Yeah, no, I think just common sense. Let's think about it. Anybody, let's say you're working a job privately, and your boss or your employer comes up to you and is threatening to get rid of you. You're going to find all sorts of reason and excuses for them to keep you around. Well, it's no different than with politicians in the government doing this. And so, just to be clear, yes, absolutely, the ruling class, for their own self-motivation and benefits, will conspire to continue the status quo. I mean, it's pretty, I get frustrated with people who can't entertain this. And I understand you don't want to be and think everything's a conspiracy, but to think that there aren't people conspiring to hold on to power, well, I'm sorry, right, pal.
Why wouldn't you? If you deigned to fucking acquire power and succeeded, and that was being threatened in some way, why would you not want to maintain it? Or why wouldn't you? Stalin's a perfect example of that. Here's a guy who acquired power through rather nefarious means, and then that developed in him because of the ways that he acquired that power, the rather devious and nefarious Machiavellian means in which he acquired the power he did. Once he got there, he was like, he saw potential in everyone around him to do what he did, but to him, which is why he started to get paranoid and why he started to fucking, basically disappear people who were close to him.
Yeah, gulag the shit out of them. But
fuck yeah.
Auger, I gotta take a piss, and I know we're going past time, but like I said, I'm up for taking as long as we can. If we have questions from the people listening,
we were just about to transition into the Q&A, so I guess we'll take a 2-minute break here, and
I'm gonna use the boys' room. I'll be right back.
Audience question time. So
yeah, I know I took us over time, but. God, the conversation's been so good.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm ending the live stream right now, and then anybody who's watching from there.
Let me take this time for anybody listening to the. Oh, I'm sorry, I totally interrupted you. I want to take a moment real quick.
It's your name.
I just want to take a quick minute to tell everybody who might be listening via live stream, thank you so much for tuning in, and have a good night. Am I out?
Yeah, live stream has ended. I was kind of hoping you'd talk about the tackle box, but hey, man, to each his own.
Oh.
Yeah. In the meantime, we have a word from our sponsors.
Oh shit! All right, give me a second here, because that fucking takes a bit. That is not easy to say. All right. Yes, a word from our sponsors. Let's see, ladies, have you recently had your box tackled? Experienced dryness, Dumbo ear syndrome? Then you need Tackle Box Spackle. Box Spackle is specifically formulated to put the shine back in your rusty grackle. Refasten that rusty saddle hackle and refurbish your most precious place until it's as pristine as a tabernacle. Tackle Box Spackle. Unshackle your tackle box today. Tackle Box Unincorporated is a subsidiary of Monsanto.
Yeah, I had to mute myself during that.
I have to fucking read that, or else I can't do it. Like, I'll fuck it up if I try and do it without reading it in front of me. That is the only way I can
It's
do
just
that.
such a
There's so much.
Dude,
It is.
never
It's a
asked
fucking
who,
tongue twister.
whose favorite people in BCLC are. I think that's why everybody tuned in.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna ask that. That'll be our first question when he comes back. That's too funny. We got so into politics. For those who are listening in or still with us, it won't always be this way. I definitely not next. Well, I can't say not at all. Next
I was just going to
episode,
say, Josh, if you want to put in a plug, we lose some more people for next week's show and next week's guest.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So if you don't already know, which you shouldn't because we haven't really advertised it yet, but the world famous Paul McGowan, world famous artist
Artist at large.
and and if you don't know who that is, Google Paul McGowan artist, and I promise you will not you will not be disappointed. The man is quite an illustrious career. He is a very interesting human being, and he has volunteered to join us as our next special guest next Tuesday, and which is phenomenal. And I'm very grateful because not only is he a friend, but he lives in England, and so he'll be. It's going to be like early morning for him. I think 1 or 2 a.m. or something like that. I don't know. I'm bad at times. So it's going to be great, though. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. Surfing, bunch of people, sleeping with women, drugs, living on the streets, maybe some art, and sleeping with more women. All kinds of good stuff.
I'm back, and traps aren't gay.
I don't know. I kind of think they're gay. Not that matters.
I mean, it's
but
a
it's
little
kinda
gay.
Like if it has a dick, like if it was born with XY chromosomes and you're doing stuff sexually to them, or they're doing stuff sexually to you, that's gay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's whatever.
I'm a student of history, and there's a Latin phrase from the ancient Romans called boy pussy. BOIPUCCI, and the ancient Romans enjoyed some boy pussy. There's nothing wrong with it.
Boy, yeah, they take after the Greeks on that one.
All right, so let's, without further ado, let's get started with the Q&A section.
Yeah, now, just so everybody knows, because we took a little extra time, when we hit the 9:30 mark, we will go ahead and do some more questions, but it'll be during the after hours. But for now, so one of the questions that I think a lot of people would like to know, Foy, is who stands out in your mind when it comes to the BCLR folks? Like, which members are you kind of fond of? Who stands out to you?
Well,
And
I don't like putting people on lists or picking favorites, but I just have to express that I do believe James Bailey is just a gem.
Absolutely.
A lot of. So here's the thing. Here's my belief is that I think it's good to be exposed to people you disagree with. And I think it makes you more intelligent and you're more smarter. And this is why, like, I haven't banned anybody from the group. And this is why, I have all the time people are like, Foy, how can you let somebody say all this racist shit or all this shit? And I'm like, you know what? Are you really intimidated by it? Are you, learn something from it? And with Bailey, I think you've learned what the average Democrat goes through their mind. Because every week in a news cycle, it's Trump is finished. Okay, so he stands out as, and he's kind of a troll too.
yeah, he is.
I mean, let me see. I do enjoy Heath. Heath is pretty funny and confrontational. I steal the majority of my memes from a young lady, the Lauren Wolf Schmidt.
who's actually listening in right now.
And then
she's here with us. Oh, I'll bet she's going to be.
And then there's other. I mean, Auger, you have always been. I'm trying. Like you've always been there. I think a lot of you and I, as I tried to express, share a lot in common.
We do.
I'm very confrontational online.
You know what? What's funny about that is I personally have never experienced that really.
What? You're not confrontational?
No. I mean you. I mean about you. Like I've never really experienced you being confrontational.
Oh man. I mean, I don't know. I tell people to fuck off almost every day. I mean, I tell people. I've told people who are pro-war that maybe your fucking kid should join and get killed in Afghanistan if you're so adamant about it. I am confrontational. I'm trying my best to improve that as I get older. And maybe this is some advice for you, Mr. Auger, is I don't know. I just learned that having drama or feuds with people, it takes so much energy and I hate it. And I just try to resolve this stuff or put it past me. I don't want to hold grudges with anyone. But you've always been someone who I share a lot in common with.
Hang on. I just got to say something real quick. How fortuitous is it that you said this might be some advice for you, Mr. Auger, and that was the moment it kicked me. like it was like, nope, gonna shut this shit out. Fuck your advice. We don't need this shit. So whatever it is you said, please, can you start that over because I missed it.
I was just gonna say, you and I believe I'm confrontational and I enjoy riling people up. And I was just as I get older, I've learned that having drama, being so confrontational, having feuds with people is exhausting. It takes so much energy, and I don't want to.
Yes,
and
I agree with you.
As I get older, I just want to put this shit aside, man. Like, and I hope you and others who are angry with each other at the group, like you just realize, come on, guys, this is the internet. We're having fun. Don't fucking be so. In the end, I'm sure we probably agree on a lot of the same shit. It's just, where everyone's got an ego,
Yeah, I think that's primarily what it is. I think there's some definite ego. And one of the issues that I see being a major issue, I felt like, what's his name? Austin Powers, when he said, allow myself to introduce myself. One of the issues that I see as an issue is communication. I see that being or a lack thereof really is a major factor in some of the conflicts that I've experienced recently, as it were, and even some of the conflicts that I've experienced in the past. Communication is definitely, I'd say 9 times out of 10, the issue.
But aside from the people mentioned, there's a lot of people I enjoy or appreciate, and I've learned a lot from. Another one, Michael Mouse, the guy with the awesome Pepe avatars. There's some of you guys I've even tried to make admins of the Being Classically Liberal page, but I've been turned down. And as you've learned, I don't have control over that. I am a member, but
right. As you said, that's not your page.
It is not.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so let's try and move on to some different questions here.
Sure.
So, quick one from Tsar Bomba. Can you say "The South will rise again" in a Southern accent?
All right, give me a second here. The South will rise again. Yeah.
He gave a yelp.
Give him a rebel yell.
All right, from our new moderator, Metalface, what is your favorite dinosaur?
I fucking like the pterodactyl. I feel like those things.
That's a good one.
I feel like they're fucking perverts and they just fly around and look at other dinosaurs fuck and they got those big beaks. I don't know, man.
You belong in the house.
that totally went a different way than I expected. What the fuck? I love pterodactyls now.
Next question she will probably ask is, what is your favorite color?
That's a lame ass question.
I know.
I like fucking. How about gray? Okay, because that
would not have expected any different.
I've never heard somebody answer what is your favorite color so confrontational. Fucking gray, okay? How about that? How's that grab you? You want to fight about it? Oh my god.
Byron English asks, how do you feel about copy pasta?
So that's a meme. That's not original at all to our Facebook group or other Facebook groups. That's just like when people say pretty funny or crazy or outrageous shit, you just make a meme about it. And
but it gets so old so quick.
It is. There's some people that they just, and I'm a silly.
Overuse it. It's just like, ugh.
I'm a silly guy.
See it like 3 times in a row.
And I don't think people should take themselves too seriously. So I don't mind the silliness. Like I said, I've spent like a decade on 4chan. I don't take everything I read on the internet as like, even though a lot of it is, people fucking pour their hearts out on social media and stuff. But so it doesn't bug me, but I understand why it would for some people.
All right, Tom,
do we have any?
Let's one more
for the show to break out for the regular time. It's 11:31.
Okay. So real quick, I just want to say to everyone listening, if you want to tune in after we cut the show, we'll have an after-hours show. Any questions we missed, we will be more than happy to answer during that time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, this is all the time we have. Thank you, Foy, for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, too. I really enjoyed having a conversation. I'd be willing to talk about other things in the future.
Absolutely. I would love to have you on again.
It's been a blast.
Will you be joining us for the after hours then?
I'll be on for the next 30, 45 minutes. That's
great.
I work the graveyard shift, so I actually have to reset my sleep cycle tonight. So I'm going to be awake for the next 12 hours while you all are fucking sleeping.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Probably start downloading the force then.
Yeah, so I got as much time. No, we didn't get
Well, I want to thank my co-hosts, Adam, Joel, Nicole, McIntyre, Sativa, all you guys. The show would be nothing without you, and I want to thank you all for being a part of this.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys, be sure to stick around for the after hours. And once again, you've been listening to House of Auger. I'm the man of the house. And good evening and go home.